Well, good morning, everybody. Tuesday, the 26th of May. Woken up this morning to what can best be described as a bit of a miserable day. Don't know where you're staying, but out here by us in Kabiga, obviously the wind is blowing, the rain is going for it, and definitely feel that winter has arrived. Maybe it's just for this KZN boy that's kind of feeling like that, and maybe you're used to this, but it's definitely this miserable time. But with that being said, really, really hope and pray that the weather doesn't reflect how you're feeling at the moment. I'm really hoping and praying that you're still doing well, you're still doing strong, and that you're still pushing forward, and that you're holding on to this hope that we have in Christ. And that kind of leads to what I want to share this morning. So, as you know, we've been journeying through the book of Philippians, and we're in Philippians chapter 3 at the moment. You'll know Barry and myself are kind of going through things slightly differently, and really pray that between both of us that you're getting some encouragement out of what we are doing. So I want to pick up this morning from Philippians 3 verses 17, and there's two very specific points that I want to pick up on here right here. And so Paul writes, "Dear brothers and sisters, pattern your lives after mine and learn from those who follow our example. For I've told you often before, and I say it again with tears in my eyes, that there are many who conduct shows that they really are enemies of the cross of Christ. They are heading for destruction. Their God is their appetite. They brag about shameful things, and they think only about this life here on earth. But we are citizens of heaven, where the Lord Jesus Christ lives, and we are eagerly waiting for him to return as our Savior. He will take our weak mortal bodies and change them into glorious bodies like his own, using the same power with which he will bring everything under his control." We see Paul writing here and starting to get quite emotional before. I mean, just listen to these words again, and I say it again with tears in my eye. You can get this feeling that this is quite a serious thing for Paul. This is something that he's passionate about, something that he's wanting us to understand, wanting us to get hold of. And for me, when I kind of look at this natural break and see where he's going, I see two very clear things. And the first one I pick up find a little bit later in these specific verses, we refer to being we are citizens of heaven. And so back in Roman times, if you were a citizen in Roman times, you were expected, if not, this is the way that you lived, was to promote the Roman way of life. Everything that you did was promoting Roman citizen. People looked at you and they knew that you were a Roman citizen just by the way that you lived, by the way that you acted, by the way that you conducted yourself. See, there's that character thing again. Your character was that of being a Roman citizen. And here Paul is saying as well, we actually aren't citizens of this world, we're citizens of heaven. But you read what he's saying here as well, that there's some people that are only doing it for a show. And that again brings us back to this point that I know that we've mentioned before and spoken a bit around, is that we need to be in the world but not of the world. And Paul saying back in his time writing the church in Philippi that there were far too many believers, in inverted commas, that were living life as if they were just still in the world, living life no different, that they hadn't experienced the life transforming power of the cross, that they knew about Jesus, but they didn't really know Jesus. And think about that. I think that's a horrible place to kind of be, that you know about something, but you don't fully know it. So imagine just, and on a quick side note, getting up to heaven one day, in the day of judgment, and Jesus says, like, why should I let you into heaven? And your whole answer is, but I knew about you. Instead of, but Jesus, I knew you. And that's what Paul is saying here, that when you see that these people that we are eagerly waiting Christ's return, but there's some guys that actually are waiting, but they don't know Jesus. And obviously, when Jesus comes again, he's going to take these body of us out, and he's going to transform us into this new body that we're going to receive. And we see Paul speaks about that obviously in his letter to the Corinthian churches as well. But for me, I think it's really sad that we actually have some people living as if they're enemies of the cross. And I think the challenge for us on that specific point this morning is it doesn't matter whether you're 15 or whether you're 35 or whether you're 95. How are you living your life? Are you living your life as if you're an enemy of the cross, where you know Jesus? Or are you living your life as if you're a citizen of heaven and everything that entails? And that's something that obviously you've got to answer for yourself. That's something that you've got to dig in and you've got to work it out for yourself. And you're going to go, yes, actually, I am a citizen of heaven. Actually, I am a citizen of heaven. Actually, I know Jesus. I don't just know about Jesus. And you may be wondering why we're talking about that, because Paul, just before he gets to this point, talks about imitating him. And when we start thinking about that, maybe you think, yes, again, here Paul's being a little bit arrogant. But when we think about it and we get a little bit deep into this, obviously the Gospels hadn't been circulated yet. So Paul couldn't have said, live according to what Christ said in the Gospels. And instead he's saying, live like people who have been transformed by Christ. Live by people who have got it, understood it, and allowed that to transform them. And that's exactly what he's saying here. That he's saying, so when people see you, they don't see you, they see Christ in you. And think about that. That's quite a thing to get our minds around. When you think about it, they don't see us, but yes, we're living here, but they actually see Christ in us. And again, that comes down to our character, the way that we do life, the way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we conduct ourselves both in business, personally, in our marriages, in our relationships, whatever it is, the way we conduct ourselves. We should be conducting ourselves the way that a believer needs to be conducting themselves. And I know that's a bit of a weird way of putting it, and I apologize about that before, but imagine getting to heaven one day and actually seeing somebody with tears in their eyes because they just actually haven't got it. And so for me, the challenging thought always comes in that it doesn't matter how old you are, whether, as I said again, whether you're 15, 35, or 95, that we need to be living our lives in such a way that the world sees Christ. The world doesn't see us. And then obviously now, when you think about it, even Paul is saying, but pattern your lives after mine and learn from those who follow our examples. Paul, by no means, was the perfect person. As we know, we've spoken about this on one of our Sunday sessions when I spoke about, deacons and that kind of stuff, that if we were to use sinlessness as a requirement to be a Christian, a requirement to be a leader, then obviously the only person that we would have would be Christ, because he was the only person that was ever sinlessness. But we need to be people that have been tested. We need to be people that are found to be without fault. And so even when we think about that, we start thinking about some biblical characters. We think about somebody like Paul. Paul was a murderer. And if not a murderer, he was at least complicit in murder. Think about King David. King David was an adulterer. If you think about Moses kind of lacked faith every now and again. And we see some of the things that he did. And we start seeing all of these things. Think about Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute. And we see these great heroes and heroines of the faith. And we actually realize, but they're not perfect. All they had was this life-transforming power, this life-transforming knowledge of the cross. And that's what Paul is saying here, that we need to get that and we need to hold on to that. But just more than that, and I'm going to go on, and you may be thinking that just Jordan hops on this a hang of a lot, but it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, that we need to not only be passionate about the way that we live and looking at the way Paul lived and using that as an example, but we also need to be influencing others to live the same way. And again, that comes down to that mentor-mentee relationship. That when we think about this, and say it again, that our Christian faith is not something that we're meant to do in isolation. We're meant to be in relationship. We're meant to be in relationship with one another. Think about that. Think about marriages. We're meant to be in relationship with our spouse, somebody as a helpmate. If we look back at Genesis, we're meant to be in relationship with God the Father. That's why Jesus came, so that we could be in this relationship with our triune God. We're meant to be in relationship with other believers to spur each other on. And more than that, we're meant to be in relationship with those that are younger than older than us, so that we can learn and grow in our faith and pass that knowledge on. And so when we think about it, what good would any knowledge be that if we're not passing it on? And so the challenge that, again, I'm going to share again this morning is that are you living your life as if you're a citizen of heaven, promoting heaven's interests, promoting everything to do about heaven? Or are you merely just visiting heaven? And I know that sounds really strange in saying that, but have you just got sort of like, a visitor's visa kind of thing where you do all the right things, you say all the right things, but you're not truly a citizen of heaven? And that's something I think that every single one of us needs to dig down and to really, really think about. But because if it is, and if we are citizens of heaven, that obviously influences the way that we live, that we're going to want to imitate somebody like Paul. We're going to strive to be like Christ. We're going to strive to live that Christ and have these Christ-like characters, realizing that we're not perfect, no matter how old we are, how long we've been doing this. But we're going to strive to be better. We're going to strive to do this because it's transformative, not only for us, but for those that kind of catch what we're doing. And so when we think about that, and I've just kind of had this thought that our Christian faith should be contagious. And maybe that's not the right thing to say in the midst of a pandemic, but as a Christian faith, it should be contagious. That people want to become citizens of heaven because they see us and they say, I want to live a life like that person. And so that's my challenge for you this morning. How are you living? Are you living as a citizen of heaven or somebody that's merely just visiting it and you're still a citizen of the world? So again, have an awesome week. Hopefully you stay safe, and we really, really are praying that we get to see each other soon. God bless.